Eleanor, or Ellie as she preferred, had always prided herself on being organized. Early was on time, and on time was late, was practically her mantra. So, arriving at the airport 3 hours before her flight to Denver was, in her mind, perfectly reasonable. Denver held the promise of a much-needed vacation, hiking in the mountains, breathing fresh air, and escaping the relentless demands of her demanding job. She imagined herself surrounded by breathtaking scenery, a welcome change from the sterile office environment she was accustomed to. But as she approached the check-in counter, a knot of anxiety began to form in her stomach. The line was longer than she anticipated, and the air crackled with the barely suppressed frustration of weary travelers. She hated crowds. She hated delays even more. Deep breaths, Ellie, she told herself. Vacation starts now. Still, a tiny seed of irritation began to sprout within her, threatening to unravel her carefully constructed serenity. This was supposed to be relaxing, after all. Mark, the airline employee, had seen it all. Delayed flights, lost luggage, irate passengers. It was just another Tuesday. He genuinely tried to remain empathetic, remembering his own disastrous vacation attempt a few years back. A flat tire, a missed connecting flight, and a hotel room that smelled suspiciously of wet dog had taught him a valuable lesson in patience, or at least the illusion of it. He loved his job, mostly because he loved helping people. There was a certain satisfaction in resolving a tricky situation, in turning someone's travel nightmare into something manageable. He could usually spot the potential troublemakers a mile away, the ones radiating a sense of entitlement and simmering anger. Today, however, he felt particularly drained. A red-eye flight and a string of demanding customers had left him feeling like he'd run a marathon. He just needed to make it through the next few hours. Then he saw her approaching, the woman in the business suit, her eyes fixed on him with a look that could curdle milk. Ellie finally reached the front of the line, her grip tightening on her boarding pass. The sign clearly stated priority check-in, and she believed she was entitled to use it. After all, she had earned enough travel points to qualify for priority status months ago. But as she stepped forward, Mark politely informed her that the priority lane was temporarily closed due to staff shortages. This was unacceptable. Ellie felt a surge of indignation. It wasn't just about the line, it was about the principle of the matter. She had paid for priority, she had earned it, and she deserved to be treated accordingly. The fact that she'd had a rough week at work, coupled with her growing anxiety about her Denver getaway, only amplified her frustration. She felt the familiar pressure building behind her eyes, the prelude to an outburst she knew she wouldn't be able to control. But the sign, this is false advertising? She managed to sputter, her voice rising slightly. She was close to losing it, and she knew it. Mark took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of his customer service training. He understood her frustration, he really did. He hated explaining policies he didn't agree with. He tried to explain the situation to Ellie as calmly as possible, reiterating that the priority lane was temporarily closed and offering to expedite her check-in at the regular counter. He even offered her a complimentary voucher for a snack at the airport copyright, hoping to diffuse the situation. He empathized with her about the long line and the inconvenience of the situation. But, still, there were rules. He kept his voice even, his gaze steady, trying to convey sincerity and understanding. He knew that escalating the situation would only make things worse, both for him and for the other passengers waiting patiently behind her. He had learned that sometimes, the best approach was to simply acknowledge the customer's feelings and offer a reasonable solution. However, with Ellie, he felt that he wasn't going to be able to break through. The complimentary voucher felt like an insult. Ellie's anger flared. "A snack?" she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the terminal. "I deserve more than a measly snack. I paid for priority service." She felt her carefully constructed facade of composure crumbling. The stress of the past few weeks, the travel anxieties, the sheer injustice of it all, it was too much. She launched into a tirade about incompetent airlines, broken promises, and the general decline of customer service. Passengers around her began to stir, some whispering amongst themselves, others openly rolling their eyes. Ellie knew she was making a scene, but she couldn't stop herself. It felt like the floodgates had opened, releasing a torrent of pent-up frustration and disappointment. She vaguely registered the discomfort on Mark's face, but she was too caught up in her own rage to care. She was sure he had some power, some button he could push, to make her life easier. Standing behind Ellie was a woman named Carol. She was dressed in comfortable travel clothes, carrying a well-worn backpack. She had seen countless airport meltdowns over the years and usually tried to ignore them. But something about Ellie's vulnerability struck a chord with her. Carol recognized the signs of overwhelm and exhaustion. She understood that sometimes a person just needed a little bit of understanding, a little bit of kindness. She had seen this same type of stress eating away at her husband during his last job. She gently placed her hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Hey," she said softly, "it's okay. We've all been there. Take a deep breath." Carol's touch was surprisingly grounding. Ellie momentarily stopped her rant, turning to look at the stranger. She saw genuine empathy in Carol's eyes, and a flicker of shame washed over her. Carol's simple gesture broke through Ellie's anger. She looked around, noticing the faces of the other passengers. She saw annoyance, yes, but also a hint of pity. She realized how ridiculous she must look, standing there shouting about a priority lane. She took a shaky breath, feeling the heat drain from her face. She was not proud of her reaction. She had let her emotions get the better of her, and she had behaved in a way that was completely out of character. She looked at Mark, his expression, a mix of relief and weariness. She opened her mouth to apologize, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, acknowledging her own misbehavior. She was too stressed and exhausted for this trip. She realized that right now, her vacation wasn't relaxing, but just another pressure weighing on her. Ellie cleared her throat and turned back to Mark, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't mean to, I've just had a really long week." She then explained the situation. She mentioned the pressures of her job, her anxieties about the trip, the fact that she was exhausted and running on fumes. She told him she had been stressed because of her own fault, not his. She didn't expect him to fix anything, but she wanted him to understand. Mark listened patiently, nodding occasionally. He had seen this transformation before. The moment when anger gave way to vulnerability, when a Karen became a human being. He could see the weight she was carrying, and he felt a pang of empathy for her. He just wanted to help. He said, "It's understandable. Travel can be stressful, and it gets even more stressful during the holidays." Mark smiled genuinely. He then said, "I've upgraded you to a seat with extra legroom. It's not much, but hopefully, it will make your flight a little more comfortable." Ellie's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected such kindness. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much." She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She walked away from the counter, a little embarrassed but also relieved. The anxiety about her vacation hadn't fully disappeared, but the anger had dissipated, replaced by a sense of calm. She realized that she had allowed her stress to dictate her behavior and that a simple act of kindness had been enough to change her perspective. Maybe, just maybe, this vacation wouldn't be so bad after all. Ellie found a quiet corner in the airport copyright. She ordered a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the planes take off. She thought about her reaction at the counter, the anger, the entitlement, the sheer absurdity of it all. She also thought about Carol's kindness, Mark's empathy, and the small upgrade that had made such a big difference. She realized that everyone was just trying to get through the day, doing their best to navigate the stresses and challenges of life. She had allowed her own stress to make her forget that simple truth. As she sipped her coffee, she made a decision. She would approach her vacation with a different attitude, a more open mind, and a greater appreciation for the small things. She would focus on the beauty of the mountains, the freshness of the air, and the opportunity to relax and recharge. Maybe, just maybe, she could let go of the need to control everything and simply enjoy the moment. After all, life was too short to spend it being angry in airport lines.